My discussion on my lecture today is going to be on optimizing paint appearance through imaging-based measurement. I think I've got a pretty good introduction from Tracy. Thanks very much. I'm the Managing Director of Rhopoint Instruments. Our portfolio of instruments, moving back since 1986 when the company was founded, we have a portfolio which includes measurement of coatings quality. The MFFT is our very famous product and ubiquitous throughout the industry. But the area we're going to talk about today is appearance measurement and appearance quality. We started manufacturing gloss meters in '86, and we've moved through multiple generations of different instruments, each adding something new and something unique and some additional information about our coatings. And we're going to expand that today with our newly launched technology. So what is optimized paint appearance? You know, we're looking at this yacht here. I think it's got it. It's got the look. It's got a great balance of reflective surfaces. The blacks and the whites are perfectly balanced. The matte areas are great. But of course, it's difficult to achieve the perfect look. We're fighting against removing VOCs from coatings, lower bake temperatures, formulation exclusions. We can't use the right raw materials we used to. So we're really about optimizing and maximizing the appearance of our surfaces that we're manufacturing and painting. So if we're going to maximize these surfaces, we really want to define what we're going to look for and how the areas we want to concentrate on when we're looking at the surface. And the best place to look, in my opinion, is to start with the CIE, the Technical Committee for Colour and Appearance, and they define the areas of appearance that affect our perception of a surface. And these four areas work to give us our sensation of perception: gloss, colour, texture, and transparency. But they don't work alone. It's a bigger matrix from the CIE. There's additional details for each of those four quadrants. And the really important thing to learn from this slide is that each of these areas don't act independently. They really influence each other. If we change the color of a surface, we can change its gloss perception. If we change the texture, if we add orange peel, we can change its gloss perception. So these are areas which are co-influence. And if we want to understand the complete look of the surface, it's a really good idea to measure as many of these parameters as we can. So let's jump in and examine a well-known and, an area we all know about and we all measure. That's the gloss portion, and dear to our hearts at Rhopoint because we've been manufacturing those instruments for so long. And the CIE explained that we should be measuring multiple aspects of gloss, but in the paints world, we often tend to just be measuring gloss alone. And what I want to do is use this as an example of, we're going to measure gloss. Is it really the optimized way to measure gloss? Does this match to our eyes, or are there areas we could improve on? And we're all measuring to gloss to ASTM D523 or the ISO equivalent. And it recommends that we measure at 3 different angles, and we switch the angles dependent on the reflectance of the coatings. And we accept that as the Bible and the law, and this is the way we should do things. But really, is that right? And it turns out it isn't really that great anymore. So this standard was actually developed in 1939. This is a really old way of measuring, but we're all still sticking to it. But there's been multiple studies that say there's many times that gloss doesn't match our eyes. There have been several thousand papers written on gloss perception since 1939, but we're still measuring the old way. It's not perfect. The good news is that in Europe, since 2014, there's been some technical committees which are trying to understand these new papers and these new methods, and for the first time, try and bring these into industry. So understand the latest academic research, combine it with the experience of the car makers and the paint makers, and bring new metrics a new measurement and perhaps tweak the way we do things. For example, I just talked about the three angles that we have. There's been five academic papers since 1992, which have all said, we really don't need to measure these three angles. The linearity of the curve matches perfectly to the eye in 2060 and 85. And this is just historic measurement, which we've been doing to these old standards. So can we learn from these committees who are making these recommendations? So as a follow-on to the last committee that which found out and did the information search, this second committee called BIRD actually started making specific recommendations about how we should measure gloss, how we should measure sparkle, how we should measure BDRF and these other advanced measurement techniques, which tell us about the overall reflectiveness of the surface. So we as committee members, there were instrument manufacturers, paint manufacturers, consumer goods, we all came together to build a new framework. And because a big chunk of that was about gloss measurement, there were recommendations that we should measure gloss in a better way, which matches our eyes. Rhopoint jumped on board with that. And we started a PhD study with a university called KU Leuven in Belgium, who are a leader in this field and a big part of this study. So we took the outputs, what does industry need to measure, and we put that into some new technology. So what it says, and it kind of makes sense, we go back to that original slide. When we're measuring gloss, we don't want to just measure gloss. I want to understand all of the aspects that affect our gloss perception. I want to measure the gloss, the haze, the sharpness, the orange peel, the waviness on the surface. But I also want to measure new metrics which match my eye, the visual gloss and the visual haze. So I need an instrument or a system which gives me all of that information in a single go. And this is what we're going to talk about today. These are the results from our instrument. So how do we do that? So the best place to start is using, as we talked about imaging-based techniques, is using a camera, because a camera is very similar and it's designed to act like the human eye. We want to capture things in a way, the same way as we see them. So the device we've designed is a camera-based system. Inside this device, we cut it through the middle. We've got two cameras. We're going to look at the surface, and we're going to look at the reflection, the gloss reflection, but we're going to look at it not in a 1D version way like a sensor in the standard. We're going to really see what's happening with the reflection. And the reason for the flexibility of this device is that we've got a number of light sources which we can combine to get lots more interesting information about the surface. So the first advantage is everything's live and it's a camera. It's really easy to line up this instrument to where I want to measure on the surface. And if I'm measuring curved or complex surfaces, the main challenge with a gloss meter is if it's a slightly curved surface, the light reflects off and misses the sensor. I can immediately see that it's in the sensor, so I've got feedback that all of my measurements are right. So I'm going to use this camera. This is the view from the gloss camera, and I'm going to capture some really detailed information about the surface. So I'm going to shine my light at different intensities, and I'm going to grab multiple images at different integration times. And that's going to give me all of the information from the very small amount of reflection to do with haze to the very large amount of reflection if I was measuring a metallic, like a chromed piece. So the camera technology gives us the flexibility to measure almost any surface. And we've got this great information. We now want to process that into numbers and values which we understand. So for me, the best place to start is with some backwards compatibility. I don't want to throw gloss away. It's relatively useful. So we're going to measure gloss, 60-degree gloss. Again, we don't need to measure at 20 and 85. That was proven in some of the studies. So we're just going to measure at 60. We're going to measure a very high definition gloss measurement. And we're going to do it in this first image by integrating the amount of light in this yellow square. I also want to measure haze, which is very important for automotive. And we do that by measuring the near specular reflection. We measure the amount of light that's in this pink area. But if you remember, our recommendations were to measure new metrics. So one of the new metrics we measure, with the flexibility of the camera, we measure a contrast haze that are very close to the specular angle. And we've backed that up with perception studies, and this is much better to our eye than the old standards, which are now kind of lost in history. One of the other things we want to do is to better match the eye in certain circumstances. And this is a well-known phenomena. When we measure different colored base coats with the same clear coat on them, they all read the same because the clear coat's the same. But our perception of these different colors, the gloss on these different colors is perceived as different. If we put a dark color, a black perhaps, and a white next to each other, and we cover them in the same clear coat, my eyes tell me that the black is darker, is glossier than the white. And this is a phenomenon called contrast gloss. And it's been known about since 1939, but it's never been measured. So our work with the university actually quantifies this difference in perception by using real perception studies and real people to produce this grading. The other really interesting thing to say about this technology is everything is open source and you can read about all of these metrics. So from the papers in the international committee, they're all published, to these individual new metrics which are published by the KU Leuven University. You can also read these. So nothing's a closed book, it's all open source, you can understand what we're doing. And we do that by combining the information from both cameras. So we've got our gloss response, this is the specular highlight. I want to understand the background color. I just measure it with my 0 degree camera. And I get a combined value which gives us this perceived gloss value. So this is what we get out of that. For those cars which we saw them with a glossy clear coat on them, they all have the same technical value in blue, but the perceived gloss value matches our eyes. So the dark one, the perceived value and the technical value match quite closely, but the white one, it can be almost half. Quite interestingly, we can take this approach and add it to haze, because haze is a difficult thing to measure. You have to have a very sensitive instrument. But when we visually grade it, it's very dependent on the light source or the lighting conditions, whether we can see it or not. So if we have a hazy panel in the laboratory or in the workshop, in the car, we can't really see the haze on the surface because the specular source in the factory or in this room, it isn't high enough to activate it. But as soon as we take it outside, we get a really massive flare from the hazy surface. So with the university again, we've created a new measurement. We have the traditional haze value, but we also have this value which predicts the haze indoors and outdoors. And we're finding this very useful for people who are doing car polishing or polishing manufacturers. One of the other important aspects, which we're all very, very familiar with, especially in automotive, is orange peel on the surface. We can measure that with our equipment and our competitors, but it'd be nice to capture it in the same time in this more affordable unit which we've developed. Because it's very visible, if we have a glossy finish with and without orange peel, our eyes prefer the smooth finish. It's a psychometric reality. So we're going to do that inside. We talked about those light sources in the device. We project a straight line on the surface and we capture it with the camera. So this is the same way I would judge the orange peel on a panel. I would take it and I would look at the reflection of a straight window edge, or I'd look at the reflection of a lamppost or an inspection light. So we're doing the same thing in the instrument. And you can see here we have 3 panels with no orange peel, a little bit and a lot. And you can see the deformation, the wiggliness of the line, which is reflected. But we want to give that a value which matches our eye. So Rhopoint in 2018 did a massive study with Volkswagen to understand people's perception of orange peel when they view a car at 1.5 meters. So how does it make me feel? And we did that with a big pair study with all of the Volkswagen quality managers from around the world. So we got a value which again matches perception and matches to our eyes. So what I'm going to get, if I'm going to measure glossiness, surface brilliance, as we call it, I've got one package which measures everything in a single hit. The whole caboose, the whole amount of information really allows us to understand what's happening with our coating and optimize it. We can also, the flexibility of our device allows us to measure small surfaces because not everything's a panel. We can reduce the beam and the gloss on this instrument with a simple adapter, which allows us to measure curved surfaces in small areas, and we get perfect correlation between it. So we're not just limited to big items and panels, we can measure shapes and small sizes as well, like sweets. This flexible approach with the camera, the image technology, allows us to measure other things which affect our view of the quality of a surface. The way this instrument is set up is that it's in a modular format. So we get the sensor's the same. You purchase an instrument, the sensor, but we can buy additional modules to measure things which are interesting for us. And one of the additional measurements is a polishing quality module. And what this does is it uses a high intensity spotlight, again, like we do in the factory. If we're looking for swirls and hologram marks on a car finish, we use a sun gun and we point it at this and we can see the marks. If we're doing abrasion resistance on a coating, or we're doing a car wash resistance on a coating, we leave these small marks, which we've never been able to measure before. With this instrument, we can. So we shine the light on the surface, and using image analysis, we count the number of scratches, and we can add tolerances to only choose ones which are of certain visibility or certain length. So again, we're going to use these different light sources to measure other things. We can use the ring light to enlighten the surface and actually measure effect pigments. So effect pigments, there's effect pigments. Effect pigments are, we know there's devices on the market to measure those, but the committee that we discussed earlier, they decided it'd be a good idea to have an open source measurement algorithm for measuring effect pigments and graininess. So that, again, the car industry, the paint manufacturers came together and they've recommended a new scale for measuring effect pigments. This is the first instrument that measures to it. So we're going to shine our lights on the surface and we're going to count the pigments, the effect pigments which are bright enough to be seen by the eye, by the algorithm. And again, this is published. So if you, rather than our competitors where you don't know how they're calculating it, we can read about this preliminary scale for sparkle and graininess, and our values correlate. So the size, the visibility, and the density and the sparkles are quantified, and we do that around the edge, which is quite interesting because it tells us about how the flake is laying, because we're going to look from all directions. And we're also going to look at 15 degrees, which is good for sizing the particles on the flake. And because of the high resolution of the camera, 10 microns, we can get quite a lot of information. And if that's not enough, we can add a magnifying piece to go to 4 microns where we can really size the pigments. Another module we've developed, and I think we're getting towards the end now, there's not so many more, is to measure texture. So we're going to use a technique called photometric stereo, where we're going to shine the light in all of these different angles. And shining these lights and seeing the intensity reflected from each pixel tells us the angle of each pixel. And we can build that back into a three-dimensional map of the surface. So this is a real three-dimensional map of a car interior measured with our device. And from that, we can actually start to understand the perceived difference in heights on elements within the map. We can also use some of the information to understand different areas of reflectivity within that map. And we can take our surface image and overlay it back on, and we get a nice kind of rendered representation of the material. But we didn't necessarily intend to do this, but it was a request from some of the paint companies that we went to see. You've got this really good high definition image of the surface. Can you guys quantify our cross-cut adhesion? it's not kind of the way we wanted to go. We had this surface appearance instrument, but we've got this great map and we've got this great imaging tools. So it allows us to quantify objectively the amount of paint that's been pulled off when we do the surface adhesion. So it's a relatively low cost module. If you've got the brilliance and you're doing cross-cut adhesion, it's really easy to add this. And it takes away the arguments between different people who are saying it's a 4 and it's a 3. So we're going to tell you how much paint's removed and the classification according to ISO or ASTM. So that's I'm a bit early. I was a bit quick there. This must have been the excitement. So that's the end of my presentation for today. There are other modules in production, but I hope that was interesting for you. Thank you.
I think this is the first time I can see something that's dated 1939. I'm not that old.
something
The rest of it I am, but that was really cool. So can you accurately measure low gloss finishes?
Yeah, definitely 100%.
Is there a limit? Like, I mean, below 5?
No. So it measures, if we want to measure gloss, we're going to measure gloss exactly the same as a Rhopoint or a big Gardner instrument.
Okay.
If we want to measure surface texture, it works better on low gloss finishes. So the lower the gloss, we can use this shape from shading method to get really accurate maps of 0.5, 0.2 glossy units.
Okay. And on the texture one, someone had asked the question of how do you calibrate?
So there is it's an optical technique, and we make assumptions about the reflectivity of the surface. So it's really good at comparing and grading things which have a similar reflectance, a similar color and a similar gloss level. So if you're making a batch of paint and we want to understand the different heights or the waviness or the texture, it's great for that. It's not so good at comparing a high gloss yellow to a low gloss black. So we have to, there's limits, but when we were measuring the same material, the correlation to like an interferometer or a really high end is absolutely superb. But you have to you have to calibrate it to understand the real actual values from it.
Thank you. And is this tool will it allow us to more accurately assess haze on like metallics?
Yeah. So we've got these new metrics which are better to our eyes. We've also has some of the older metrics which have haze compensation to remove the metallic content and just consider the haze from the top coat. So yes is the answer.
Okay. And are you seeing the OEM starting to change their specs yet?
It's only been out about 9 months. Okay. It takes 15 years to get an OEM to change the spec. So not quite yet, but we're working on it. We've got some really high degrees of interest in the car companies and the paint companies and yeah, lots of different areas.
Are you planning more clinics so that you can gather data to make it so that the OEM? I think that's a good way to go forward with the data, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, good. Other questions? I don't want to miss any in the audience here. Let's see here. I think it was the height resolution. There was can you measure transparency?
Not well. It's funny you should say that. So we have a transparency module in development. So we turn the cameras off and we have a backlit graticule to measure too. So yes, we potentially can. We can use the sensor in a different way. Not on the market now. We are using it to measure backlit switches and things like that in the car interior, which is important for the OEMs.
Okay. And did I ask this? Is there a limit to the scale of texture that can be imaged?
Yes, definitely. But it's quite big. It can be up to 1 millimeter. But again, we have limitations with the sharpness of edges. You see the way the light's projected. If we have sharp edges, it's difficult for the instrument to resolve them. It's not perfect, but no height measurement instrument really is. It's a really good tool for comparing like surfaces.
Okay, so people if they want to understand like the height resolution for topography, they can reach out to you and explain it that way.
Yeah, 100% yes.
Okay, I like that. This is really interesting.
But the resolution can be as low as 0.1 microns. It's a really good when we're resolving these different areas. It interpolates between them and gives us a really nice measurement of the surface.
Yeah, your adhesion, going through, and I often see the adhesion rating get changed, you know, by the OEM or different people.
Yeah.
It'll be really nice to see that if it's a good standardization tool to take out some of the variability.
Exactly. And we're now moving on. We've got requests to measure stone chip and other things, which is kind of
that would be another good one. Yeah, if you could have a big
it's,
enough surface area to analyze it.
it's just a great tool for the lab.
Yeah, agreed. Do you see AI as a useful tool for future developments?
Definitely. So I was talking to my colleague. We've got a number of panels from a powder coating supplier, and they're trying to judge the PCI powder coating scale on matte surfaces. Oh, thanks for that. So there is something you can see in there, but it's not related to the height of the waves on there. It's to do with the size. So we took maps of all of 40 different panels and fed them directly into an AI engine, and it's doing a pretty good job of rating them. So we're already trying those things because AI is really good at images. So the maps are like images. We can feed those in and identify defects and things like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I really see good things for this in the future. This is really a great topic. Thanks for bringing it to us.
Thanks very much.
Thank